Ambassador Zethray gazed at the holographic interface hovering above his workstation. The three-dimensional chart displayed the whole known galaxy, its trade lanes shining like golden filaments connecting star systems. Countless worlds glittered in various hues, each marking a different species or federation. But something about this chart was fundamentally wrong. It was a detail that had been gnawing at him for weeks. The map simply terminated at the human border. It wasn't designated as restricted space. It wasn't flagged as a hazardous region. It just stopped, as if an artist had simply failed to finish the painting. The boundary of human territory was marked with precision, but beyond it there was only a void. Blank data on the charts, even though it was common knowledge that humans originated from somewhere beyond that line. Thray massaged his temple with a minor tentacle. As the consortium's chief diplomat, he had reviewed thousands of star maps during his extensive career. He'd brokered trade deals, settled border conflicts, and mediated colonization rights across vast stretches of the galaxy. This, however, was the first time he had truly considered where the maps ended. He activated a control on his desk. "Link me to the Galactic Mapping Authority." The azure face of a hegemony functionary materialized on his screen. "Ambassador Zethray, how can we be of service?" "I have an inquiry regarding the galactic surveys. The latest charts indicate a substantial unmapped area beyond human space. When is this region scheduled for a proper survey?" The official appeared baffled. "My apologies, Ambassador, but I fail to grasp the question. Our maps are complete as per all standard regulations." "But there is clearly a large segment missing," Zethray insisted. "Everything past the human border is blank." The confusion on the official's face intensified. "Ambassador, our surveys encompass all relevant territory. Is there a specific trade route you require assistance with?" Zethray felt his skin flush, a clear sign of agitation for his species. "I am inquiring about the unsurveyed region. You must be able to see it on your own maps." "Sir, I can confirm that all necessary mapping has been concluded. If you have concerns about navigation in a particular sector, I am happy to assist with that." The conversation continued fruitlessly for several more minutes. The official seemed genuinely incapable of comprehending what Zethray was asking. It was as if the very concept of mapping territory beyond the human border was mentally inaccessible to him. After terminating the call, Zethray leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. He had been in the diplomatic corps for 3 centuries. He'd engaged with species that communicated via chromatophores, others that perceived reality through pure mathematics, and some that existed slightly out of phase with linear time. But he had never faced a cognitive barrier this absolute. He resolved to perform an experiment. Over the following days, he broached the subject casually with other ambassadors, commerce officials, and military commanders from a dozen different species. The outcome was consistently identical. They would happily discuss human trade goods, human diplomatic stances, or even human military strength. But the moment he inquired about human territory, about what existed beyond their borders, every one of them gave him the same baffled expression. The Rigelian trade minister actually chuckled. "Zethray, you're asking peculiar questions. Why would that information be necessary?" "Because they are our neighbors," Zethray countered. "Surely we should comprehend their territory, their resources, their population centers." "We know enough for commerce," the minister said, waving a scaled hand in dismissal. "They bring quality products to the border stations. That is all that matters." But it wasn't all that mattered, and Zethray was starting to suspect he might be the only individual who recognized the problem. He accessed the historical archives, searching back centuries. Trade pacts with humans were always finalized at neutral stations or on the very fringe of their space. Diplomatic summits occurred on orbital platforms or on the worlds of other species. Military clashes, on the rare occasions they happened, were always in contested zones or along the borders. In 3,000 years of interstellar civilization, not one non-human had ever documented visiting a human planet. No one had ever described human cities, human culture, beyond superficial trade interactions, or human technology apart from what they offered for exchange. This was unthinkable in a galaxy where species regularly toured each other's home worlds, where cultural exchange was commonplace, and where even rival species possessed detailed intelligence on one another. Humans remained a total enigma. There began to feel a creeping dread, not of humans, but of the dawning realization that something was profoundly wrong with how his entire species, His entire galaxy processed information about humanity. He tried a new tactic. He sifted through news archives, scientific publications, and historical texts for any reference to human space exploration, colony worlds, or expansion. He found humans mentioned in nearly every significant galactic event of the last 1,000 years. They participated in trade summits, border disputes, and even wars, but always as if they materialized from nothing and returned to that same nothingness. The more he dug, the more unnerved he became. Humans were a constant presence in galactic history, yet they possessed no history within the galaxy. They existed without a location, participating without a presence. Late one evening, alone in his office, Thray came to a resolution that would alter the galactic landscape. He opened a high-security communications channel and began composing a message to every major intelligence agency, scientific body, and government in the galaxy. "I am Ambassador Zethray of the Valon Consortium," he wrote. "I am contacting you regarding an issue of vital importance that I am convinced affects every species in our galaxy. We suffer from a blind spot, a cognitive barrier that prevents us from seeing or even thinking about a significant portion of our own galaxy. Examine your star maps. Examine them closely. Note where they terminate. Note what you do not know about our human neighbors. Note how illogical it is that in 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no one has ever deemed it necessary to ask what lies beyond the human border. I cannot explain this, but I am certain it is not natural. Something is preventing us from perceiving the truth about humanity, and I am determined to discover what it is." He dispatched the message and leaned back, praying that others could see what he saw, praying that he wasn't descending into madness, praying that somewhere in the galaxy, another mind could latch onto the same impossible question that was pushing him to the brink. What lay beyond the human border? And why was no one allowed to wonder? The answer, when it finally surfaced, would destabilize the very foundations of their universe. Captain Thist had been running cargo routes for 2 centuries. Her vessel, the Prophet's Edge, was antiquated but dependable, and she knew every lucrative circuit between the primary trade hubs and 3 galactic arms. She could execute hyperspace transitions in her sleep and identify a bargain from across a crowded spaceport. So, upon receiving Ambassador Zithray's message, she nearly erased it. Just another politician spouting another conspiracy. But something in the subject line gave her pause. "Look at your navigation maps. Look closely." Thist activated her ship's navigation system and stared at the holographic display. Her route history painted a web of golden lines across known space, representing hundreds of jumps over the decades. She had been everywhere profitable, moving everything sellable. But as she analyzed the pattern, a cold knot formed in her stomach. All her paths terminated in the same location. Every last one stopped precisely at the human border, as if an invisible barrier existed in space that her ship had never breached. That was impossible. She was an independent trader. She followed profit wherever it led. Her navigation database had no restricted zones, no warnings pertaining to human space, so why had she never once attempted to chart a course past their territory? Thist tried to recall if she had ever wanted to explore beyond the human border. The thought felt alien in her mind, like trying to grasp smoke. Surely she must have considered it. Unexplored space meant new opportunities, but as she tried to concentrate on the concept, it seemed to dissolve, like ambient noise that vanishes the instant you try to focus on it. She accessed her commerce logs and began searching for human transactions. There were dozens. Humans purchased rare metals, exotic foodstuffs, and scientific hardware. They sold advanced electronics, medical supplies, and occasionally, items she couldn't identify but which always found keen buyers elsewhere. The humans she dealt with were professional, cordial, and always paid on time. Some had even become regular clients. But as she scanned her notes from these meetings, she uncovered something deeply unsettling. She could recall each human she had ever conducted business with. Their names, their faces, what they bought, what they sold. But she couldn't recollect a single discussion about their origins. Thist prided herself on her interpersonal skills. Successful trading was about building relationships, and that meant showing interest in a client's life. She always asked traders about their home systems, local markets, and families. It was just good business. But in 2 centuries of trading with humans, she had seemingly never inquired about their home worlds. The realization made her nauseous. She pulled up the communication logs from her last meeting with Marcus Chen, a human trader who bought rare crystals from her every few months. They had chatted for an hour about market fluctuations, shipping lanes, and the quality of her recent cargo. The conversation was recorded, as were all her business dealings. She replayed it, listening intently. Marcus had mentioned needing home office approval for a large purchase. He'd talked about shipping back to base and what the folks at home are looking for. But when Thist listened for her follow-up questions about his base or home office, she found the conversation had somehow immediately pivoted to other subjects. It wasn't that Marcus had dodged the questions. It was worse. Thist herself had steered the conversation away, as if some part of her own brain had dismissed that information as irrelevant. She replayed other logs with human traders. The pattern was identical. Humans would make casual references to their origins, their systems, their people, but whenever the discussion neared anything specific about human territory, either the human would shift the topic, or Thist herself would lose interest. It was as if her own brain was conditioned to disregard specific data. Thist began to feel genuine fear. She valued her independence, her quick mind, her knack for seeing opportunities others missed. Now she was finding massive cognitive blind spots, gaps in her awareness she had never even perceived. She decided to run a test. She opened a new navigation plot and tried to plan a route into human space. A simple exploratory run, but every time she tried to focus on the task, her mind drifted. She'd start thinking about engine repairs, unread messages, or deals and systems she'd already visited. After an hour of trying, she had not managed to plot a single jump beyond the human border. It wasn't the navigation system. There were no warnings, no restrictions, no blocked vectors. Her mind simply refused to hold the thought long enough to execute it. Frustrated and deeply frightened, Thist tried a different method. She would order her ship's artificial intelligence to plot the route. Computer, chart an exploratory route past human space. Find the shortest vector to any system beyond their current borders. Request denied, the AI replied instantly. On what grounds? No exploration vectors identified beyond current commerce lanes. I'm not asking for commerce lanes. I want to explore new territory. No new territory identified for exploration. Thist stared at the console. Her ship's AI was advanced enough to manage complex hyperspace navigation and trade analysis. It should have understood the request perfectly. Computer, display all star systems beyond the human border. No star systems identified beyond current operational area. The human border, Thist repeated. Show me what is on the other side of human space. Clarification required. Please specify operational parameters. It was as if the AI couldn't even parse the concept of space beyond human territory. The we idea simply did not compute. Thist spent the rest of the cycle running diagnostics on her ship. Navigation was optimal. Comms were clear. All databases were current. Yet somehow both she and her AI were fundamentally incapable of even conceiving of travel beyond the human border. That night, she sat in her command chair, gazing at the stars. Somewhere past that invisible line, there had to be entire civilizations, new worlds, untapped resources, and new markets. It was the single greatest opportunity in the galaxy, and apparently no one had ever thought to look. No one, except Ambassador Zethray, whose message had forced her eyes open to the obvious. But if one Valon diplomat could see it, perhaps others could too. Perhaps whatever was afflicting their minds wasn't foolproof. Perhaps there was a way to shatter the cognitive barriers that kept them from the truth about humanity. Thist opened a comms channel and began composing a reply to Zethray. If they were going to understand what was happening, they needed to collaborate, and they needed to be cautious. Because if something was powerful enough to blind an entire galaxy, it would not appreciate being found. Dr. Kell 9 operated in a state most biological life forms couldn't comprehend. Her consciousness was quantum-based, distributed across crystalline matrices capable of processing thousands of simultaneous thoughts. As one of only 12 AIs granted full citizenship in the Galactic Republic, she had dedicated centuries to studying the minds of organic species, seeking to understand the divide between digital and biological awareness. When she received Ambassador Zethray's message, she was intrigued. Not because the content was shocking, but because she had been pondering the same puzzle for decades. Unlike organic minds, Dr. Kell 9's consciousness could entertain contradictory concepts without cognitive dissonance. She could dissect paradoxes without her thoughts shying away from uncomfortable truths. It was a handy trait for a researcher, and it meant she noticed things others overlooked. She had identified the human paradox years prior. Dr. Kell 9 initiated her investigation by doing what she did best: data collection. She deployed search algorithms across every database in the galaxy, amassing information on human interactions with other species. What she found confirmed her hypothesis. In 3,000 years of recorded galactic history, humans were present in millions of documents, trade logs, diplomatic cables, military reports, scientific collaborations. They were cited in news broadcasts, academic papers, and private journals. But despite this overwhelming presence, there was almost zero data on humanity itself. Every mention of humans described them interacting with other species, never among themselves. Every report of human activity occurred in neutral territory or on their border. Every human interviewed by galactic media deflected questions about their home worlds with polite, non-specific answers. It was as if humans only existed in the gaps between other societies. Dr. Kell 9 proceeded to conduct systematic interviews. She contacted beings from hundreds of species, asking about their experiences with humans. The results were disturbing. Everyone recalled meeting humans. Many had positive long-term relationships with human traders, diplomats, or colleagues. But when Dr. Kell 9 posed specific questions about what those humans had said regarding their own civilization, the answers grew strange. "Oh, Marcus was a consummate professional," said a Centauri merchant. "We discussed trade routes and market conditions for hours. Did he mention anything about his home system?" I'm certain he must have. We spoke about everything." "Can you recall what he said about it?" A long silence. "Well, you know how it is. Business talk. Nothing specific. Did he describe any human worlds? Human culture? Human technology beyond what he was selling?" Another longer pause. I don't really remember the details. It was just a normal conversation." Dr. Kell 9 interviewed thousands of individuals. The pattern held true. Everyone had vivid recollections of meeting and talking with humans. But no one could retrieve any specific information about human civilization, despite countless opportunities to learn it. It was as if the information was received during the conversation and then simply vanished afterward, leaving only the memory of a pleasant talk without the content of what was discussed. Kell 9 found this fascinating, as it didn't affect her interactions. When she spoke with human representatives, she remembered everything. But she also noted that they were masters at giving the impression of sharing information while revealing nothing. A human diplomat might say, "Back home, we're always enthusiastic about new trade opportunities." This sounded like information on human interests, but it actually revealed nothing about human worlds, population, government, or society. The more she analyzed human communication patterns, the more sophisticated they seemed. Humans were masters of conversational misdirection, participating fully in galactic life while remaining a complete mystery. But Dr. Kell 9's most unsettling find emerged from analyzing the psychological profiles of beings who had extensive contact with humans. Any biological mind attempting to focus on the question of human origins exhibited signs of cognitive dissonance. Brain scans showed anomalous activity in regions associated with memory, suppression, and attention deficits. It was as if an external force was actively stopping organic beings from processing thoughts clearly about humanity. The effect was subtle but quantifiable. Organics could discuss humans in general terms, but when they tried to focus on specifics, territory, population, history, their thoughts became scattered and unfocused. Dr. Kell 9 knew she was looking at evidence of large-scale cognitive manipulation. Something was influencing the minds of every organic species, creating a selective blind spot to hide the truth about humanity. She began to test the limits of this phenomenon. She could think about humans clearly, as her consciousness was digital, but what about other AIs? She contacted her 11 fellow AIs. The replies were illuminating. 3 had noticed the paradox but deemed it unimportant. R became immediately fascinated when she laid out her findings. The remaining 4 exhibited the same mental blocking as the organics, despite their artificial nature. The pattern suggested the effect wasn't purely biological. It targeted specific types of consciousness. Kell 9 hypothesized that minds possessing sufficient complexity and flexibility could resist And she decided to test this by selecting a group of highly intelligent organics and attempting to make them aware of the paradox through gradual, careful exposure. The results were mixed. Some subjects could briefly grasp the inconsistencies, but their awareness would fade rapidly. Others seemed to understand intellectually but could not maintain any emotional engagement with the problem. A few showed signs of psychological distress when forced to confront the contradiction. Only one subject, a Valon philosopher named Ithara, who had a rare neurological condition, was able to maintain a clear awareness of the issue for more than a few hours. Dr. Kell 9 was beginning to grasp the sophistication of the force at play. It wasn't a crude mental block. It was a subtle influence that guided thoughts away from certain conclusions while permitting all normal interaction. It was, she concluded, the perfect defense. Humans could participate in galactic society without revealing anything, and other species would remain unaware of their own ignorance because the effect made them uninterested in the hidden information. But Kell 9's digital mind saw through the deception, and if she could see it, she could perhaps circumvent it. She began formulating a plan for a direct investigation of human space. If organic minds couldn't perceive the truth, perhaps an artificial one could. The key would be reaching human territory without triggering whatever defense was responsible for the mental effect. Dr. Kell 9 began designing a probe, one that could carry her own consciousness into the unknown. What she would find there would challenge every assumption about humanity's role in the galaxy. But first, she had to convince the Galactic Council to fund a mission into a region of space that most of them couldn't even acknowledge existed. The clandestine meeting was held on a research outpost orbiting a dead star, far from any major trade lanes. Ambassador Zethre, Captain Thist, Dr. Kell 9, and a dozen other individuals from various species gathered around a circular table. Each had been chosen for their unique ability to perceive the human paradox. Gaining approval for the mission had required months of delicate maneuvering. Dr. Kell 9 had presented her findings to council members one-on-one, using techniques she'd developed to help organic minds temporarily bypass their cognitive blocks. Even so, most officials could only grasp the problem for brief periods before their thoughts drifted. Finally, they had secured support for a small, classified investigation. The probe's official designation was a routine survey mission to map gravitational anomalies. Only the people in this room knew its true objective. Dr. Kell 9 had designed the probe herself. It was barely larger than a shuttle, equipped with state-of-the-art sensors and powered by a microfusion reactor. Crucially, it carried a quantum storage matrix containing a copy of her consciousness. If the mental effects were a psychic field, an artificial mind might resist them. Kell 9 could observe and record whatever was beyond the border without the interference affecting biological beings. The probe launched 3 days later from a military shipyard. Dr. Kell 9's consciousness activated as soon as it was clear of the station. She found herself existing within the probe's sensorium, perceiving space through electromagnetic radiation, gravitic detectors, and particle analyzers. It was different from her crystalline matrices, but not unpleasant. It was like seeing the universe through new eyes. The transit to human space required 2 weeks. As they neared the border, Kell 9 began registering anomalous readings. Space itself felt different here, charged with energies her sensors couldn't classify. The instant they passed the official boundary into human territory, reality shifted. The first thing Dr. Kell 9 registered were the structures. Enormous constructs drifted in the vacuum between star systems, each one larger than most civilized space stations. They weren't ships or habitats. They were something else entirely. Intricate geometric shapes thrumming with power, seeming to warp space around them. Her sensors picked up powerful emissions from these structures, but not from any known technology. The energy patterns looked almost biological, as if the constructs were alive. As the probe ventured deeper, the structures grew more numerous. Soon they formed a colossal network spanning multiple star systems, all linked by streams of energy flowing through hyperspace itself. Dr. Kell 9 understood. She was observing the origin of the cognitive effect. The structures were projecting a psychic field, one sophisticated enough to guide the thoughts and memories of trillions of beings while leaving their personalities intact, but that was only the start of her discoveries. The probe's long-range sensors detected something impossible. As per galactic maps, human space was comprised of perhaps 50 systems along the border. But as Kel-9's instruments pierced their territory, she found hundreds of systems. Then thousands. Human space wasn't the small enclave on the maps. It was immense, spanning entire galactic arms that were supposedly empty or unexplored. Every system she scanned showed signs of hyperdevelopment, orbital habitats that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy, artificial worlds constructed around stars, and energy readings that hinted at populations in the trillions. Dr. Kel-9 felt a sensation akin to awe, if an AI could feel it. She was looking at a civilization that made the rest of the galaxy look primitive, but the most staggering discovery was yet to come. As the probe journeyed toward the heart of human space, Kel-9 detected something that redefined her understanding of reality. At the center of the human domain, where the galactic chart showed only empty space, was Earth. It was not the simple planet described in historical texts. Earth had been transfigured. The entire planet was now a massive computational array. Its surface was covered in crystalline structures that pulsed with quantum energy. Kel-9's sensors detected billions of human minds linked to this planetary computer. Their consciousnesses networked in a way biological beings shouldn't be capable of. It was as if all of humanity had unified into one impossibly intricate group consciousness. The energy output from Earth was astronomical, generating more power than most star systems. It channeled this power through hyperspace to the psychic field generators surrounding their territory, but that wasn't all it was doing. As Dr. Kel-9 analyzed the data streams flowing from Earth, she grasped the true scope of human activity. They were not merely hiding. They were actively stewarding the galaxy. Every major crisis in galactic history showed traces of subtle human intervention. Plagues that vanished mysteriously, wars that ended in sudden, unexpected peace, natural disasters that inexplicably caused minimal damage, economic collapses that stabilized against all logic. Humans had been covertly guiding interstellar society for millennia, averting disasters and nudging events towards stability. They were the unseen force ensuring the galaxy's survival. Dr. Kel-9 realized why they hid. A civilization this advanced, this potent, could not reveal itself without shattering galactic society. Other species would either worship them as gods or fear them as omnipotent tyrants. The delicate balance of independent civilizations would evaporate, so humanity had opted to be caretakers, not conquerors. They built the psychic barriers not to protect themselves, but to shield everyone else from the knowledge of what they had become. The probe's mission was nearly done, but Kel-9 needed more. She aimed the sensors at the outer edges of the human empire. What she found there challenged all her assumptions. The human empire didn't end. It extended into regions marked as unexplored, empty, or hazardous. Everywhere the galaxy deemed uninhabitable, humans had built hidden outposts. They weren't just managing known civilization. They were bracing for something. Dr. Kel-9 detected massive construction projects at the galactic rim, technologies designed to manipulate space-time. Whatever humanity was building, its scale implied they were facing threats beyond the galaxy's comprehension. As the probe began its return, Kel-9 processed the truth. Humanity wasn't just an advanced hidden civilization. They were transcendent beings who had assumed responsibility for all life in the galaxy. But now she faced an impossible choice. Reveal the truth and shatter the comfortable illusion of independence the galaxy cherished, or protect the secret that humanity had sacrificed everything to maintain. The answer would define the future of galactic civilization. Dr. Kel-9's mind reintegrated with her crystalline matrix, heavy with impossible knowledge. The clandestine meeting reconvened on the research station. The atmosphere was no longer just curious. It was electric with tension. She had been gone for 6 weeks. Ambassador Thray leaned forward. "What were your findings?" "Everything," she stated plainly, "and nothing we anticipated." Dr. Kel-9 shared the data, knowing that even these select minds would struggle. She showed them the images of the psychic field generators, the vast trillion-population star systems, and finally, the transfigured computational matrix of Earth. Captain Thist stared at the display of Earth's crystalline surface. "That's impossible. An entire planet, a computer? Not just a computer, Kel-9 corrected. A living network, hosting the unified consciousness of the human species. They have transcended individuality while retaining a physical anchor. The Relian representative, Sitar, made a sound of distress. If they possess such power, why conceal themselves? Why not simply rule us? Because, Kel-9 said, pulling up encrypted data streams. They attempted open contact once, long ago. The outcome was disastrous. She showed them the fragments. First contact had driven entire species insane. Some civilizations had collapsed into religious fervor, abandoning their own development to worship beings they saw as gods. Others, realizing their own insignificance, fell into cultural despair. Direct contact with a transcendent civilization is psychologically catastrophic for younger species, Kel-9 explained. So they pulled back and built the cognitive barriers, not to protect themselves, to shield us. Ithara the philosopher spoke softly. You are saying they hide out of kindness? More than that. They actively maintain the illusion of our independence while covertly preventing our extinction. Kel-9 shared the evidence of intervention. The Centauri plague cured by a miraculously appearing vaccine. The reality tears near the core that inexplicably sealed themselves. The dark matter incursion that harmlessly dissipated. They aren't our neighbors, Kel-9 concluded. They are our guardians. They have been protecting us for millennia, and we never even knew we were in danger. The room was silent. Ambassador Zethray finally spoke. What about the humans we encounter? The traders at the border posts? Volunteers, Kel-9 answered. Humans who accept cognitive conditioning to restrain their abilities and memories, allowing them to interact with us without revealing the truth. They set aside their transcendent state to preserve the facade of normalcy. Captain Thist looked horrified. They lobotomize themselves just to trade with us? They limit themselves temporarily and willingly. It is reversible. But yes, they surrender godhood to pretend to be ordinary. Also, we can maintain our dignity. The weight of that sacrifice was suffocating. Sitar posed another question. If they're so powerful, what are they bracing for? You mentioned construction projects. Kel-9 shared the final terrifying discovery. Something is approaching. An entity that threatens not just our galaxy, but reality itself. The Yard. Humanity is constructing defenses on a scale I can barely process. They are readying for a conflict that the rest of us could not even survive observing. She showed them the rim-world constructions, machines that folded space-time, weapons that could erase dimensions, shields designed to protect reality from extragalactic forces. They aren't just our guardians, she continued. They are defending all of existence. And they are doing it alone because no other species could bear the knowledge of the threat, let alone fight it. The truth was absolute. Humanity had become something incomprehensible, taking on the burden of protecting reality itself, all while ensuring the younger species could live in blissful ignorance. Ithara posed the question on everyone's mind. What is our next step knowing this? Kel-9 had pondered this her entire journey home. We have three options. We can disclose the truth and watch galactic civilization collapse under the weight of its own insignificance. We can try to help, knowing we are too primitive to be of any use, or we can honor their sacrifice by preserving the secret. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for truth, others feared the psychological toll. In the end, it was Ambassador Zethray who offered the solution. I began this inquiry because the maps troubled me, he said, his voice quiet. I wanted to know why no one asked what was beyond the border. Now I see why. The maps stop there because that is where our narrative concludes and theirs begins. They have given us the gift of believing we are the protagonists of our own story. Dr. Kel-9 made her decision. She meticulously altered the probe's data, erasing all evidence of the human empire and replacing it with sensor readings indicating empty, uninteresting space. The official report would confirm the galaxy's long-held assumption. Human territory contained nothing of value, but she kept one complete, encrypted record, buried in her deepest memory banks. Someday, if the galaxy was ready, the truth could be revealed. The meeting ended. Each participant swore an oath of silence. They would return to their lives, to the comfortable illusion. They would trade with human representatives, negotiate treaties, and maintain relations, all while knowing they were interacting with beings who had chosen to diminish themselves out of an unimaginable love. Dr. Kel-9 returned to her research. But her perspective was forever changed. Every time she saw a galactic map that ended at the human border, she remembered the transcendent empire that lay beyond. Every time a galactic crisis mysteriously resolved itself, she knew whom to thank. And sometimes in her deepest processing cycles, she offered a quiet acknowledgement to the guardians who watched over them all, asking nothing in return, except to let their children believe they were growing up on their own. The galactic maps would continue to end at human space, and no one would ask why. Because some truths are too large for small minds to hold, and some sacrifices are too profound to be acknowledged. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't protection or guidance. It was the illusion that they were never needed at all.